So I have a question.
Yeah,
Are all Filipinos good at singing?
pretty much.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Well, I feel like you are probably more infinitely fun at parties if you can sing, or I feel like you can get down more. I don't know, you might be in the corner if you don't really sing.
Yeah, I think Filipinos really love singing. Everyone seems to have karaoke machines at their home.
Yeah, or they know someone with the karaoke machine, like their neighbor, if their family's not right next to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, today's episode, we're talking about the stereotypes of, I guess, people have about Filipino culture.
Yeah.
And you're representing the Filipino side of the culture as the ube. And I'm representing the Japanese and Korean culture side of it.
Yes,
And
I'm
we'll,
Filipino American, so
Yep.
that's my experience growing up here. What Filipino culture is, also particularly in America. And when we talk about stereotypes, they may be partially true. I think that's where stereotypes come from, but we'll talk about what parts are true, what parts are not, or if some are just outright lies or craziness. Because, yeah, stereotypes can be good or bad, and they can be completely, wildly out of place or could apply. So,
yeah, and we can try to
talk more
figure
about
out.
that.
We can try to figure out maybe the origins of the
Mm-hmm.
stereotype, possibly. For example, Filipinos being good at singing. I
Mm-hmm.
think the stereotype, in my guess, is coming from famous singers. For example, a singer who sang the Disney song for the
Oh, Leah
song,
Salonga. Yeah, she's a pretty famous one. A famous one from many years ago, from when I was a kid, maybe even before I was born. But she's on Broadway and everything now too. But yeah, there are many, many famous Filipino singers and some worldwide. Even in a way, some more popularized than other Asian singers, at least
I think
early on.
yeah, I think that's true. I don't think I can think of, let's say, Japanese singer or Korean singer singing like Disney songs behind the scenes. I think it turns out it's the Filipino singers who are like behind that people may not know, like unless they look into it a little
Yeah.
bit. I didn't even know it was like it was not non-Americans or even Asians singing Disney songs.
Yeah.
Because my imagination would be like it's the American people, like traditionally white people or black people might be singing like those movie songs. But turns out there are some Asians who are like worldwide, really competing.
Yeah.
Are there any other known like Filipino singers in America that I may not be aware of? Because I'm not really listening through the pop culture of US, but you grew up here. You've been listening since the 80s.
Yeah, there's a few big ones. I know Cherise Pimpengo is a really big one.
Cherise Pimpengo. What's
she won, I think, The Voice. I could
Oh,
be
okay.
completely wrong because I don't watch any of those shows, but
The Voice,
she was super
yeah.
popular, and I think she even came out with an American single too. Really like amazing voice too. I feel like the songs that a lot of Filipinos learn how to sing are ones that require a lot of, well, one, practice, but also like I don't know exactly what you would call it, like training your voice, because it would be like Mariah Carey or Whitney Houston or any songs where you have to carry some of
Yeah.
the notes and
There's
you
like
have
a
to sing very
power.
like
There's a
lot of
powerful.
power.
Yeah, it's less
And
of.
so like
yeah.
when they sing the songs, it's very impressive. But those are the kind of songs I feel like, well, not necessarily younger generation anymore, but the older generation, at least from my generation, because I still listen to a lot of older songs, retro songs, resonated more in songs that they ended up learning more. So yeah, it's interesting. In Disney movies too, there would be a main voice actor for the character. Like Jasmine's main voice actor is different than her singing voice, which is Leah Salonga. So that was something I noticed in old Disney movies. And I think other like cartoon or animated film companies similar to Disney also did that. 'Cause I feel like it was very popular in the 90s to have movies where the main characters sang songs or even the side characters sang songs, but they weren't the same voice actor.
Yeah. I think you probably want to sound more like Americanized as a character voice speaking, but maybe when you sing, sometimes you can mask the fact that you're not native speaker because when you sing, it's you don't have to like pronunciate some things like American way, like or you don't have to
Yeah.
have like this accent, but it's like more hitting the note with the
Yeah.
right English sound, right pronunciation, and you could be Asian, and people would not even guess that it's a different
Yeah, because
person singing, right?
the voice sounded so similar to the actual talking voice.
Mm-hmm.
So, fun fact, I actually have Leah Salonga's old cassette tapes. If you don't know what cassette tape is, you're probably really young. I have her
Like
Tagalog
90s.
ones. Yeah, I have her
good old
Tagalog
90s.
ones and not her English songs. So I listen to her Disney songs, but also the ones from the Philippines.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think on the YouTube, if I look up like Filipino kids singing, you'll see a lot of talented kids on the street, like they're like 6 years old or something, and singing so well,
Yeah.
right? That it's like, oh wow, like I don't think I see like Japanese kids sing like that.
Yeah.
Like those, yeah, like when they're maybe 12 or 13, they start to sing really well. But I don't see a random kid on the street like just vocally singing. I think it's just partly Filipino culture, probably to be like, I'm just gonna sing and I'm just gonna be like out and loud on the street singing. Right. In Japan, it's more about like, well, you gotta be quiet. You gotta
Yeah,
behave.
you can't just
right?
start belting out
Yeah.
random tunes. Yeah, in the Philippines, there's a lot, people have a lot of parties throughout the years. Like throughout the year, people celebrate birthdays and different holidays, and singing, I think, is a major part of those holidays. So people just end up singing, no matter how old they are, from when they're young or old. So I think it's very embedded in the culture. And I mean, if you think about it, it's something that's doesn't cost money to do too, to sing. It doesn't cost money to sing a song, to practice songs and sing. So it's
Yeah.
a free activity.
And everyone seems to have a karaoke machine because when I visited your parents' house the first time, you know, there are like multiple TVs and like a karaoke set up. And we did karaoke too. But also when I visited Philippines
Yeah.
and met your relatives, we went to your relatives' house, right? I think there was
Yeah,
like a
in
big
Bicol. Yeah.
There's a big karaoke machine, and didn't we sing till like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or something?
Probably. I've done that multiple
Yeah.
times in the Philippines.
It's not like
Yeah.
insulated house or soundproof house. Like I
Yeah.
think neighbors could hear us sing till like 3 a.m.
Yeah.
I guess
and it
nobody
doesn't bother
cares.
anyone. Yeah. And no one, there was no noise complaints that were filed. No
Yeah.
one knocked on the door. It was like, take it down a notch. We're trying to sleep.
Right. In US that would be
Yeah.
a problem if you
Yeah,
do
I mean,
that
noise
after 10
disturbance.
p.m. Yeah. So I think partly my guess is that freedom and not being so like uptight about the culture of like singing and making noise might be
Yeah.
giving them a little more like
I mean, everyone does
free
it.
reign,
Like,
right?
you know, if your neighbor's going to have a party and do it too, then they're probably not going to complain if you do it.
Yeah.
So if everyone's like that, no one's going to complain. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the next stereotype that I have and a lot of viewers might have is that everyone is Catholic
Oh,
in the Philippines.
majority Catholic, or a lot of Catholics. I think I want to be careful about that a little bit, because there is also another part of the Philippines that is very Muslim, but that is not the majority. It's split. There's a big Catholic population and there's a big Muslim population. And they actually kind of live in another part of the Philippines, so it's separated in a way.
Interesting. So
such a-
physically separated.
Well, I'm such a bad Filipino because I know Luzon is where a lot of Catholics live, but there's like another major island or part of the Philippines where it's Muslim. So, and I know there have been a lot of squabbles between both sides. I think with religion, sometimes it can bring out extreme behaviors or wanting everyone to be the same religion, so you're all on the same page. But yes, there's a lot of Catholics, a lot of Catholic traditions kind of woven into the culture. But yeah, I mean, most Filipinos I grew up with in the US were Catholic or had some kind of religion in their life. Very few I knew were other religions or atheists. I mean, maybe some were Christian, but I don't think when I went to the Philippines I met any other, just Christians, like Presbyterians, Episcopalians. Even though I know some friends here, people here that are Filipino and are of those other kind of sects of like Christianity.
If you ask anyone on the street, are they most likely believing in a type of religion in Philippines? And
Yeah,
most
most
likely
people
Catholic?
do.
Okay.
Yeah. And there are even tribal beliefs and religions that I think what's awesome about today is they're trying to revive a lot of those because those were kind of lost with colonialism of the Philippines.
Did it last
By
like
Spain.
300 years?
Yeah,
or
it was
something?
about 300 years,
Okay.
the Spanish colonization.
Is that when the religion of Catholicism was introduced?
Yeah, that's pretty much kind of when it took over. And a lot of
Okay.
and it was and so the Philippines became modernized, and so that changed a lot of things too, like a lot of like what they wore, what they were taught, or how they lived changed because of that.
Yeah, I remember when I visited what's the city? The main city,
Manila, the
Manila,
capital city.
capital city, and I think we were waiting for a taxi or something. We were looking through at the church, and like there's so many people at church on like a random day. I don't think it was even.
I don't think it was Sunday.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
wasn't even Sunday, and there's
yeah.
I don't know, like was it like 1,000 people or something in the
It
church?
was a really big church. Yeah,
It was open. It wasn't like
Yeah.
a closed in building. It's just like open building, and there are a lot of people in there. And that site was kind of interesting or impactful for me because coming from Japan, sure, like on the New Year's or a special day, Japanese people would go to temple, right? Just casually because that's a cultural thing to do, not because they believe so much into that one god or something. It's just like, well, culturally there are many gods and temples are supposed to bring you luck, so it benefits them to go there, right?
yeah.
Or it's like an event, just a fun thing to hang out. And thinking Korea, I think Korea has a strong culture of identifying with the Christianity and other religions, but looking at the scene in Philippines, it felt like a different level of religion kind of woven into the culture.
Oh, like a devotion
I don't know if
because
like-
they were there on a
like I don't know if it's a
Random
devotion or it's like a desperation or something like a driving like it's not so much like, oh, I'm a faithful person I'm following, but it's more like somehow you're supposed to be there. You're supposed to be that person who goes to church, not like because I'm holy, but because maybe you're like that's the only hope that they have in some ways.
I think there might be a little bit of truth to that. I think there are definitely many devoted people. I mean, my mom is very devoted to religion, always needs to go to church on Sunday, always needs to be on time, so very particular about that. She prays the rosary, so she's very religious. But I think too, because there are a lot of impoverished people in the Philippines, going to church is almost, well, for one thing, it might be a pastime for a lot of people, even if they're not that religious. It's something to do if they don't really have that much to do at home. And another thing is, I don't know if all churches are like this, but the churches tend to be more well kept, and some of them have air conditioning. Although I remember when I went to
Interesting.
some of the churches when I was younger in the Philippines, they were not air conditioning. It was so hot in some of the churches. Like they would have huge fans, but I felt like the air was so hot that it wasn't cooling down. But it's kind of a refuge from some people's homes too, to just go to church versus like staying home maybe in a place that doesn't feel that good, or
Yeah,
you know,
I think that
yeah.
may be what I was picking up in that location. Like it's not like you're like I'm faithful, so I go to church. It was like you almost like want to be there because of other benefits that might come with it. Like there was even a kid trying to sell us stuff in the church.
I don't think it was a kid. I think it was this old lady.
Oh, I think a kid bumped into me,
Oh,
and then like the kid was trying to like make me pay for
trying to show you something.
yeah.
Yeah, I think an old lady was trying to sell me something. She was trying to like push something into my hands. That's also, I think, more poorer part of
The
Manila.
yeah. It was
I
a very
remember if
poor
it was
part.
like Quintos, I think, but my mom grew up like going to church there, or she went to church there a lot.
Oh,
But she also did her nurse residency at Tondo General Hospital, I believe, and that's like one of the poorest parts of Manila. It's like the slums. So I don't know how close that
yeah.
is there, but yeah,
It,
definitely
it
very poor people live
yeah.
there.
It kind of looked like that is like a hope. That's the building of like there's nothing else that's better like in their life, like because it was such a poor neighborhood that we were in, right? Maybe in a way it's like the good old like churches like back in the time where the buildings aren't like today. It's like all AC and nice and projectors and all modern and staged out, right? That's like new church that a lot of us in US are accustomed to go to, but in the case of Philippines it was like much more like a little old buildings and very traditional, like almost like a shiny display of things, right? And it's like maybe you kind of had a time travel back in time. Maybe that may have been the portraiture of the church, like a divine,
Oh,
something divine,
at that time,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
back then, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I think there are definitely kind of like those older elements of worship there, but yeah, I think it's a really interesting juxtaposition between like Western worship and Philip worship in the Philippines. Although they like Catholicism is very traditional in the Philippines, like how the churches are decorated, very ornate, and with a lot of imagery and icons and things like that. So I
So
think it's very important to Filipino
yeah.
people.
So would you say everyone's Catholic? Pretty true. Not so true.
Um, from my experience, like 60%, 70%
60%
are
true.
probably, but
Mostly
maybe a
true.
little bit more. But I've just met majority Catholics in the
Majority.
Philippines, even though I know there are also Filipino Muslims and other religions. I've never personally met them, so this is my personal experience.
So the follow up stereotype: everyone in Philippines poor due to the idea that it's a third world country, low GDP, they don't make money, so and so.
Yeah.
Would you say that stereotype of everyone is like pretty poor? Would you say that's like a
Well, I wouldn't say
true?
everyone is poor. There is definitely a large population in the Philippines. I wish it was smaller that's under the poverty line, as in they live in like basically like aluminum or card, almost like tin homes, not cardboard box homes, but
Poverty,
and they
okay.
don't have access to clean water. They just throw their trash out wherever because I don't really think the trash or recycling
Like a system
picks
is
them
not
up.
there.
Yeah,
A
it's not
government is
there
not doing their
because they
job.
also people came from the country, set up their homes kind of
Oh, they
just
built.
out of whatever in the city so they could just like live there and find work. So it's technically not legal. So a lot of those people are called squatters that just
Squatters.
yes, it's called squatting when you just set up a home wherever and you're not legally
Oh.
permitted to live there or like build anything there. So they just build their homes. These are really really poor people in the Philippines. So this is not everyone, but and they like tend to live like near the river and then yeah, they just throw a lot of them because yeah,
Oh.
there's no trash or recycling, just throw their trash like everywhere because there's no system in place to pick it up. They just make food from like whatever. It's probably another episode we could talk about like how very poor people live.
Is,
Not that my family is very, very poor, but I do understand a little bit about that experience visiting the Philippines multiple times
is
as a
it
kid.
is it poor only in like the city of Manila? Like I've seen that place. It was pretty poverty to
Well, you
me.
saw a big
Yeah.
part of the because my parents are working class too. My family is working class, so they lived in a part that was like not like super super poor, not like tondo poor, but like my parents definitely were not rich and didn't have that much money, or my mom didn't have like a lot of money, so they grew up in an area that was definitely more working class that maybe could considered
Did
to be
they
poorer
did they
here.
live like in poverty, or did they have like, let's say, natural resources that kind of helped them get by, or do you know if they're like pretty much like in poverty line?
My family.
Yeah, like not having, for example, not having enough food, not having access to sanitary like water, or like
Mhm.
the electricity, like basics, right, of
Yeah.
the shelter needs. Did they
Yeah.
not have it, or did they
They
had
had
they
it.
had it?
So that's why they're not like poor, but their Philippines are really poor that sometimes they can only afford to eat like once a day and like eat
Oh,
mainly rice. My parents were not that poor. My mom at least was not that poor. Like they at least ate actual meals.
okay.
They had, sinigang or adobo with their meals. And they had electricity and like water and could afford to go to school. If you're really poor, you can't really afford to go to school. But yeah, there are very, very poor parts of the Philippines, but there are also very nice parts. I've seen many different types of people at different income levels. I have relatives that are more wealthy in the Philippines, and I've been to their homes. And some of their homes, like, they're still in the city, but they have multiple floors to their homes. They have like multiple bedrooms and bathrooms. I think it was my dad's family on his side in the city that they had like an intercom system in their house that they could call their kids like upstairs, and they lived like in a really nice house. And I think their house was also gated. So that's another thing too. Like I saw like a lot of wealthier families, like they would like their homes would be gated, or they would like live in a very nice like subdivision more like away from the city, like where the shanties or
Mm-hmm.
like the impoverished people were. But the people who did have things like they a lot of them had help, like maids too. Like if you have money, then you usually have maids, and my family had a maid, so that's also why they weren't like super poor, because if you're really really poor, you're most likely the maid, or if you're a woman, you're most likely the
Oh,
maid.
interesting.
You don't have a maid. But if you do have, like, if you're at least like middle class, then you most likely have a maid.
Oh,
Yeah.
so middle class can afford a maid.
Yeah.
Is that kind of like having having ability to be able to hire like a nanny when you need it, or it's
Yeah.
more like, do they live with you,
They live
or
with
they
you.
live with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's, I mean, arguably you could say that's doing pretty well then, that like the nanny lives with you, or the maid lives with you, and they're a nanny, or they clean and do things like that. If you have more money, then you have a separate, like you would have a nanny, you also have someone that cleans and maybe someone that drives you around. Wealthy people, I have family that live there that they have drivers, specific drivers that drive them around. So their cars can be safe in the garage, and then when they want to go somewhere, they call their driver, who's pretty much on standby, who will drive them to places.
Why is that a case? Because in many other countries, like even Japan, Korea, that I've known, like there's no such culture of someone living with you and have like almost like a lifetime of employment by living in someone's house,
Mm-hmm.
right? Why is that a job, I guess, that became popular in Philippines as opposed to like other form of jobs, like
Mm-hmm.
doing part-time job of, working in factories or grocery, like a cashier at some of these common places?
Yeah, you pretty much don't make any money if you work like at a restaurant or
Oh,
work in a lot of maybe service industry jobs.
interesting.
You're severely underpaid in the Philippines.
So you get
Uh,
paid more as a maid
Probably,
or
but at
stable?
least, at least, so like if you are a maid or a butler, or you serve a family, you live with them. So then at least like you get like to live somewhere that's clean. You have like a roof over your head and you have food. And those
Oh,
people tend to be from the country, or people that are much more poor than you. So to them, it's almost more like a
oh.
luxury to have that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Access to shelter
Mhm.
is like a big benefit.
Yeah,
To
if you don't, Yeah.
Oh,
Having anywhere to
interesting.
live. Or you live in the city and at least now you have like a roof over your head. Even if it's a little tiny area that you live in, at least it's better than like you
Oh,
living in a tin shack next to the river in
right. I didn't
rotten water.
think about
Yeah.
that. Yeah, like I was sometimes thinking like, why would you want to live in someone's house? But of course, if you can't even afford to have
Hmm.
your own like apartment complex or something,
Yeah.
right? Or that you're not living with your family because you came from countryside, so there's no relatives
Yeah.
or like a friends that you can do, I guess, shared rent or something.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that's even a common thing in Philippines, but makes sense. Like you almost have a guarantee of shelter.
Hmm.
And if you work for rich people, I guess you kind of have access to the shared nice kitchen, nice
Yeah.
bathroom, and
Get to
everything,
eat
right?
at least decent
Yeah,
food.
because you can cook it
Mhm.
for them, the fancy
Yeah.
food that you can
And the
eat,
work
right?
isn't going to be maybe as laborious as preparing food. If you work fast food or you work retail, like you have to be on your
Oh,
feet. I mean, you have to be on
interesting.
your feet probably a lot too if you're a nanny, but at least then you're just watching one family's kids and like you get to know them and that's over time that maybe that's easier for you. So, I think there's just more security in that. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm curious if they even have like minimum wage or something like that. I assume there's no such
There
thing.
probably is minimum wage, but I don't think it's enforced. It's
Yeah.
probably not enforced from what I know. And a lot of these things could be changing too. It would be really interesting to look at it more in the present state of the Philippines because these were my observations growing up. Especially like the maids, I always thought was very interesting, maids and butlers, because that's not really a thing we have here in the US. Even
Right.
if you're rich, like a lot of people still take care and raise
Yeah.
their own children
You
and
can't.
clean their own house.
Yeah, or you hire part-time
Hmm.
person to come in and help, but
Yeah.
you don't have someone live with you, and that's even a weird concept that someone is living with you permanently. It's kind of
Yeah.
weird, unless you're like me, maybe Hollywood star making millions. Maybe
Yeah.
you're too busy to maintain your house.
Yeah.
But okay, that's pretty interesting. And speaking of like maybe that's part of how they escape the poverty, right? I notice a lot of Filipino people are also like leaving the country and
Hmm.
trying to go to countries, for example, like nearby countries like Japan.
Yeah.
I know it's a popular destination. There's also US
To get work.
to get work. For
Hmm.
example, your mom migrated
Hmm.
from Philippines
Yeah.
to US as a nurse, right?
Yes.
Is it true that like there's really not a great opportunities for especially people who are maybe educated and gone through college that after they graduate there's lack of opportunity in Philippines that a lot of them decide to leave the country.
I think there are a lot of opportunities in the Philippines. I feel like they're just not getting paid enough to stay or to be able to sustain their life.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of need for nurses and doctors. I think everywhere there's always a need for medical staff, but if you get paid, I don't know, like a tenth of what you get paid if you worked in Europe, like the UK or in the US, then more likely you would choose to travel abroad and work than stay because you will make a lot more money even if you send money back to your family in the Philippines. It's
Interesting.
still more than what you would make in the Philippines. So it's almost you stay out of loyalty, I guess, to your country, like in the Philippines. And I know there are doctors and nurses that stay and work, but there are definitely more potential to get paid a much higher livable salary elsewhere. Yeah.
So for example, if your mom were to stay as a nurse in Philippines,
Hmm.
you'll get paid much less and maybe the only patient that she would see are like a rich people or like middle class people who can even afford to go to
Mm,
hospital.
yeah, maybe. That's a good point. Maybe.
Because
Yeah.
if there are no clients being the patient, right? If they don't have enough of them paying enough money,
Yeah.
that translates directly into how much money you get paid, right?
Yeah.
So, so I guess we don't know the facts of stats of like what kind of people are
Hmm.
even admitted to hospital. I assume richer people have a higher chance of going to the hospital, taking care of their health, can afford to pay the Medicare or the medical expense, but
Yeah.
still not enough that you would still make a lot more money as a nurse in
Yeah.
US.
I think there's just a lot more money, especially in the US or Canada or Europe. I even know that there are foreigners that go, or even Filipinos that have money or from abroad that go back to the Philippines to get like dental work done or do other medical procedures that are much more expensive in the US because even you can go to a really nice one in the Philippines and it's still much cheaper to do dental
Oh,
work.
interesting.
So that's the other side of it too. If you have money, then it's and you can go to the Philippines, then you can probably, I don't know, update your denture, your teeth or whatever, and get the work done.
Interesting. Would it be true for other occupations, or is it mainly like nurses? Because I think that's the most popular, I'll say, job stereotype, right? Like if you ask the Filipino Americans or Filipinos who are in US
Yeah.
what their occupations are or what their parents' occupations are, most likely it's nurse,
A lot of
probably,
times it's
right?
nurse, right?
Right.
Yeah, definitely a lot of nurses in Filipino families. Yeah. Um, I think in the Philippines, there's a big emphasis on entertainment culture. I think actors would get paid, it seems like, very well, or singers or anyone in entertainment seem to be paid very well. That can help them get out of poverty. I mean, maybe that also goes back to if you become a
Oh,
really good singer, then potentially
oh,
you can end
interesting.
up getting famous and then make a lot of money and get your entire family out of poverty. So it's kind of like a lifeline out of that life.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, that's definitely a thing. So I think that's really maybe a hot take. That's kind of unfortunate, though. I don't think actors and people in entertainment should be being paid more than like scientists or like doctors or people that are actually like doing something that will improve or advance or help people live. I think they should definitely be paid more fairly, a living wage. Even teachers, a lot of my family are teachers in the Philippines, but those skills don't transfer over very well in the US. So they have to, when they come to the US, a lot of people who are teachers or even like professors or even jobs that were more high esteemed in the Philippines, like they just end up like working like
I like a grocery.
grocery or work at a gas
Yes.
station, jobs that they aren't bad, but not at the same level as a professor or teacher. So it
Interesting.
just, you have to start almost from ground zero when you come to like a
It
Western country like
it
the
it
US.
doesn't translate because US would require like certain degree or certain certification that
Yeah.
doesn't work if you have that in Philippines, or is the bar lower in Philippines to just become a teacher? Or
It could be, but I guess it might also kind of depend on what kind of teacher you are too, right? If you were like an English teacher in the Philippines, I don't know if it makes sense for you to become an English teacher in the US where English is probably taught in a different way. So maybe you have to go back and get more certifications. And then by that time, assuming you come to the US when you're older, like 40 or 50, either you don't have the energy or time to get those certifications or get the proper education.
interesting.
So it might just be easier for you to take jobs that you can like quickly start earning money at least and like save it and then kind of invest more in future generations, like your children and then like their grandchildren.
Got it. So the
Yeah.
children can hopefully bring the money, right,
Yeah.
to the family. That
Yeah.
actually segue nicely into my last question or my last stereotype about the Filipinos valuing their family a lot more than
Yes.
other things.
Yeah.
Would you say?
I think that's a stereotype that's actually very true. In the Philippines, like your family is pretty much everything. So, and I think there are definitely good and okay and then not so great aspects about that. But I do feel like there is an emphasis on taking care of your family unit, but also like your greater family, as in your cousins, your uncles, aunts, nieces, nephews. Your family is like a wider net of
Mm.
people, and it's a tighter bond, I feel like, than some other cultures. But there are a lot of other family oriented cultures too. But I think the Philippines is probably one of the most family oriented cultures.
Yeah, I think just by looking at your family culture, and maybe I shouldn't compare with my family because I think my family is a little bit odd, even in maybe Japanese, Korean culture,
Mm.
because our families are all spread apart in different places. Like we only see them when someone important in the family like dies, and then
Where do they live?
like some of them are my Japanese sides are mostly in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
but some are in China, and my Korean side, my mom's side, some are in Korea, some are in Japan, some are in US. I don't know if there are any are in Europe, but like they're all spread apart, different states. I haven't met my cousins like for like I don't know 10 to 15 years.
Oh, okay, that's a really long time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe the funeral that one time in Japan might have been the only
Where
time.
you all saw each other.
Not even all,
Oh no,
just
just
the
a
ones
few of
that are in
you.
Japan, right?
Oh,
Because
okay.
nobody would cross. Even on a wedding, we didn't have. I didn't even know my cousin were even married, and they even had a kid until I
Oh.
saw them on Facebook. So
Yeah.
it's super detached, and I don't know. I can't say that's a good example, because in more like if you're in the Korea, let's say, or Japan, and your family is not as international, I think you have more tighter bond.
Mm.
But uh, when I observe your family, who is international, right? A lot of them live in Philippines, and a lot of them live here, and some of them live in Seattle, some of them live in Houston. Even then, the bonds are strong, where we
Mm-hmm.
would fly to each other. It's like state and
Mm-hmm.
then meet
Mm-hmm.
and then stay there for like a week
Mm-hmm.
and have a good time. And it's not like once in 10 years, like it almost happens like every year.
Yeah.
I notice, right? So I can see visibly that your family or maybe Filipino family as a whole values like family getting together,
Mm-hmm.
and like yeah, of course, like we welcome you to stay to each other's house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I just saw my cousins like 2 months ago.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they even stayed in our house. Like I
Yeah.
think 10 of them stayed in our house. I'm like, oh my god,
Yeah, there was like eight of them.
I got overwhelmed, but it's because I'm not used to that, like
Yeah.
the life of just bunch of people living in your house and
Yeah.
being really loud and like chatty, right?
Yeah, because it's like just come over and then you just come over and like hang out.
Yeah.
So that's how I felt like life was, at least even growing up too, not even just my immediate family, but I had a lot of birthday parties and I went to a lot of birthday parties growing up. There were a lot of Filipinos that came over. I mean, obviously I have like my grandma, my dad's mom, and some uncles, aunts, some family friends came over to the birthday parties, but I would also go to friend parties that were like neighbors or my mom's friends from work, things like that. We would go to their parties. And then, yeah, I was very interconnected in general growing up, just going to like a lot of parties. That was like a thing. And then whenever I went to the Philippines, I would always, well, be surrounded by family at my grandparents' house. So this is my mom's side in Navotas. That's where they had their house pretty much growing up, near Manila. I think Navotas is near Manila. Not very good with my Filipino geography, but pretty much it was like 4 different families, aunts and uncles, and their children. So my cousins living in the house, and they would
One house.
one house, but then they also had different subsections that were outside that were connected to the main house.
Oh,
So it was like a compound almost.
like a townhouse?
No, it was like almost like a compound. There was a main house, and then outside you would go around the corner. It was still, there was like a corridor outside that would go to like my uncles and aunt's house, one uncle and aunt's, and then another uncle and aunt's house, and they were all connected. Like you just like walk over.
Oh, so it's almost
outside.
like you own a land, or someone probably have the land, and then they all just decide
Yeah,
to
this
let
was in the
each other
city.
build.
Yeah, like in the city. So there were also a bunch of neighbors, like really like just on top of you though too. So everyone was like super close to each other. And so whenever I went to the Philippines, always surrounded by a ton of uncles and aunts and cousins. And I would go to a lot of other family relatives' homes. I wouldn't even know how I was related to them, but I just knew I was related to them. They're like, oh yeah, this is your third cousin, or like, this is like your second aunt, or like your 16th. I don't even know what this is.
Third,
Like, but there's someone in your family.
third
On your
cousin,
dad's side.
as in, what do you call it? Like your cousin, right? And then there's like
Yeah.
an extended cousin.
Or it could
Like-
be like your mom's cousin would be your second cousin.
Oh, okay. That's how you
Right.
count it.
I think that's a second cousin.
Okay.
So like if it's your mom's cousin, like in Bicol, my mom has a cousin.
Okay.
That cousin is my second cousin because this is my direct cousin. My direct cousin is my aunt or uncle's child. But my mom, if she has an uncle aunt and it's the uncle and aunt's child, it's my second cousin because it's her first cousin.
Okay.
So I would meet like my second and third different cousins, and so it would get very zany. I feel like all the connections to other families. But yeah, I would go to their houses. I barely know them, but we would just be eating at random people's houses like every other day. And I would even stay at like relatives' homes I've never met before, but they're like, yeah, here, you stay in this room. And I would like sleep there, take a shower, eat breakfast at their house, like, because we'd be still be there in the morning. So it's a very open culture, especially like if you're any kind of family to someone, like it's very like open and welcoming. And that is like a feeling that I do really enjoy, like that kind of like safety in a way, or at least that like kind of like comfort in knowing that like there are people there for you in a way, even if it's not like super close. Like I don't know you that well, but it's like I open my doors for you type thing.
That's interesting. So it's almost like we can try to find your third degree connection from you to like someone in Philippines that you can always find. So if we want to want to travel to like let's say Cebu, like we can hit up on LinkedIn or Facebook. Hey, you're my third cousin. Let me stay at your house. Right?
I mean, honestly, you can probably just look at my dad's connections and just look at similar last names, and then that would be his relatives on Facebook. So that's how you would know. Because also everyone on the Philippines is on Facebook, especially if you're like my parents' age, baby boomer age. They're all on Facebook. So I can see a lot of my family. I also have a lot of really random family members that like add me on Facebook too from the Philippines. I'm like, I don't know if I've ever met you before, but they just add me.
They're like, no, you're my fourth cousin.
Well, and then I have to verify my parents. I'm like, do you know this person? Like, so I don't just start adding a bunch of random people to my Facebook. So there are a lot of Filipinos on Facebook.
Everyone wants everyone's cousin to each other or something like that.
A lot of people are related.
Yeah, but that's the true stereotype. Everyone is cousin to each other in Philippines. Well, hope you enjoyed this episode of the stereotypes in Philippines. And I know there are a lot more stereotypes out there. Like if you have stereotype or what your understanding of Philippines and want to ask the Ube to answer the questions.
Ask Leah.
Ask Leah, right?
Yeah.
We can try to answer the questions.
Yeah, or do some more research. I think this conversation also kind of unearthed some topics to go deeper into as well. So we have like more information and data about some things to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, I think modern day Philippine might be a little bit different than what we remember or culturally how it's been in like the 90s and early 2000.
Yeah.
And especially post-COVID, it might be completely different in some of the norms.
Right.
So yeah, stay tuned if you want to have more, see more episodes like this. Also hit the bell so that you get notified whenever we have episodes. We also have shorts that we release every single day. And we have TikTok, so you can subscribe on TikTok as well.
Wherever you are the most,
Yep.
subscribe so you get stories about Asian life
Yeah.
all over the world.
Yeah. So until next time, bye.